Good morning, everybody. Glad to have you here, and hope you'll humor me just a little bit and like and share or post or comment or do all three to the post this morning. And I'd appreciate that very much. It doesn't do anything for my ego. To be honest, I usually don't even look at that. But it does, again, help get the post in front of more people. So, that being said, if you want to follow along, we will be back in the ninth chapter of Acts looking at the call of Saul. I almost labeled a sermon, titled a sermon one time, The Call of Saul Before He Was Paul. Well, that's where we are. The call of Saul before he was Paul. Beginning in verse 6 of the ninth chapter, but rise and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul rose from the ground, and although his eyes were open, he saw nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And for 3 days he was without sight, and neither ate nor drank. Paul, as probably most of us would in that situation, is in absolute shock and awe. He is terrified, barely able to continue. I think part of that was the experience. Part of it was the very weight of his own sin, the conviction of his actions were just brought to his attention. We know that he felt like he was the worst sinner. He tells us that later in his writings, that he was the chief of sinners. He felt like he was it. And he recognized that his only hope was to listen to this voice that was speaking to him, that was commanding him. And this voice commands him to get up, to rise up, to go into the city, and there it will be told, you'll find out what you are to do. And so notice something about this, that God doesn't tell him right then what he's doing. Just gives him enough information to get him to the next step. Just tells him, okay, you get up, and you go on into the city. You go on into Damascus. And when you get there, I'll get back with you. Go into the city, and there it will be told what you must do. Didn't again, just you follow me that far, and you do that, and then we'll see what was going on. And so he is overwhelmed, and it says for 3 days he was without sight, didn't eat, didn't drink. I don't know what he did do, but I'm betting he did a lot of praying. I bet he did a lot of looking for God. I bet he did a lot of soul searching, a lot of reflecting over his own history, where he had been, and what he had done, his actions, even the actions he had intended, what he was on this trip for, and all these that are around him. Verse 7 says they stood speechless. They heard a voice, but they saw nobody. They saw something that they had never seen before. They see this great light. They see this big brute of a man, trembling, shaking, laying on the ground, um, fetal position. I don't know. Tears running down his face. I don't know. Um, but they knew something was up. And the key to this whole passage is that God tells him to go to Damascus, and Saul goes. Um, he went where he had been directed. He goes and does what he is told to do, and goes into town. Doesn't eat, doesn't drink for 3 days. So that was the next step in Saul's journey. It's a good lesson on some steps. Just very simple step. Well, usually simple. Sometimes it can be more complicated than others, but that's obedience. When Saul made contact with Jesus, when he had this conversation, he became obedient. He became usable. He became flexible, and was willing to go and to do, willing now to be led. I think that's such an important line in this passage, that Paul is led, or Saul, excuse me, at that time. He is led by the hand to Damascus. Nobody could have taken Saul yesterday and led him anywhere. Nobody could have told Saul what to do yesterday. Nobody could have got him to change his mind, do anything any differently than what he was doing. But when he met Jesus, everything changed, and he became a usable, leadable, flexible servant of God. Are those characteristics we have today? Are we usable? Are we flexible? Are we usable, leadable, flexible for the Lord? Maybe he needs to open our eyes, or maybe he needs to close them. Well, he did to Saul, but he needs us to be flexible and usable for the kingdom. Think about it, and we'll see you here tomorrow morning.